He was shattered walking out, seeing that camera there. He's thinking, I'm gonna get this. Well, I'm pretty sure he's going to get it. I'll get this job without having to front up to any media, and then we'll just come up and I'll do the big all-in presser, and then I'll get on with it. And he's walked out, and there's Tom Brown, and for the very first time, he's sitting there going, what am I going to say here? I can see his mind ticking over. I'd love to give him a little clip and say, leave me alone, Tom, but that's not going to wash very well. How am I going to handle this? In the end, he said, yeah, I got the interest. I spent 4 hours with him. I don't think anyone else has spent 4 hours with him, and I think it's happening.
He handled it beautifully, and his media conferences have always been must-watch. He was the one coach you would always watch his post-match media, because he'd challenge the media on a few things as well. And I mean, he's going to be box office. Jeff Walsh says that they haven't been relevant. They'll be relevant now. Is he doing it for the right reasons, Ross? Is he all in? I mean, he's never wanted to go through the process recently since leaving Fremantle. Doesn't feel like he's going to have to do that now. Is it the right move? Saints fans, 0433 90 out 11 16. What it will do is make you relevant again. But how far he can take this list remains to be seen.
Okay, so he's sitting at the press conference, the first one, and you're there. You're in the audience. What's your first question? So you have a think about that. I'm sitting there going, okay, I understand that you got burnt by Carlton badly. Then every time a job comes up, your name's mentioned, and every time you've batted it away, right? Why is this different then? Why is this opportunity different to Essendon, who are arguably better placed, or not better placed, a bigger club? I think that's fair to say, better resourced. Why is it different? Well, Carlton, we know they got nutted, but why is this one where you turn around and go, yeah, I will go and take the 4 hours? Because you'd have to say they're going to guarantee him the job. That he had no interest in a process, and that's fair enough. That's your choice. If you can look on your own, go back over your own history and reputation and go, well, yeah, I will, but you come after me and headhunt me, and then I'll be interested. So that appears to be the fundamental difference here. I'm not going through a process. You come and woo me, then I might be interested.
That's the difference. That is the single difference. There would be some romance about it. I guess he's spoken about, people like their ego stroked a little bit. I'm assuming that he would have had Revolt calling and Goddard and Montagna and everyone, Lenny Hayes calling him, and that would be nice to hear, wouldn't it? They'd come back. You didn't get the premiership. You could have. We nearly did it. You can do it this time. There'd be something inside him with that. I think the financially it would be an amazing opportunity to continually set yourself up. Not that I don't think that he's struggling, Ross Lyon, but there's a couple of things. But the main thing is that he has been guaranteed the job, you would think, and I want to know if that call came before Brett Ratten was sacked. You'd have to think he had an idea that this was coming.
Well, I think when you go back on that press conference and listen, and I take them at their word, when they say definitively we have not spoken to Ross Lyon, you can't say that if you haven't. But then in the same breath they say, but we are certain of what we need. So I think they're saying we are certain that what we need is out there, and his name's Ross Lyon. We just haven't spoken to him yet, but we will.
But how did they know that he was going to put his hand up and say yes? I mean, so that they may not have spoken to Ross, but they may have spoken to Ross's people.
Well, it's a very, very good point. And these are the semantics of media and what you say and whether you can defend. We haven't spoken to Ross Lyon in the past 2 weeks, or the past week since we actually made this decision on Brett, but we might have spoke to him in July.
Yes.
Or August. We might, and it mightn't have been about footy business. We might have been talking about something else, and footy might have come up, or I mightn't have spoken to him, but Nick Revolt might have.
Exactly.
Anyway, so this is semantics. But it would appear that they know where they're going and they'll live and die by it, and that's going to be the fascinating and interesting thing. And, I listened yesterday to Jared about it. I was out just having a wander around, and his perception about hard edge and all that sort of stuff. Well, that can be true, like it's not the be-all and end-all. And give credit to Ross Lyon. He's a very, very smart footy man. Now, whether he can make it work and happen again, that's going to be a great watch. And I'm not 100% convinced that it will or it won't, but he's smart enough to read the leaves, and he's smart enough to understand where the game's going, and he's smart enough to know that he just can't come in and bash them over the head and think that the whole thing's going to change around. There's nuance to a hardness as well. It's about the harsh realities, but then picking someone up if it's gone too hard, and you got to, I suppose, Saints people would have to back in that he can get that right.
And historically demanding of those around him as well. So those assistant coaches, he gets the best out of them as well, and and will continue to do that. So he'll build a team around him. Lenny Hayes is already there. They need to replace Brendan Lade, but he will have people around him that he can drive really hard and get the best out of them as well. Saints list isn't as bad as some people believe. For me, most media pundits had the Pies at the end of 2021 not challenging. Now look at them. As all Saints polls are running hot, about 65% want Ross back, and the people have spoken.
That's an interesting one too, because polls and everything else are great, but then the consensus with the Times Gerard yesterday was no chance, So in the end, if they hitch their wagon to Ross Lyon, then they're hitching their wagon. Some people say they're going to throw their membership out, that old chestnut. Well, we'll just see. You got the text machine, Gary. That's basically social media. Well, you know what I mean. That's work. That's a business. We use this as a business tool. Outside of here, I don't. And then this one, which I loved. Can't do a hard day's work, Lion. That's why you like the media. 3 to 4 months off here. Thank you very much. Let me know what you do, sir or lady, and that's fine. So give us a call, 1300 736 736 0433 1116. I mean, it's a temperature tester, and we're hearing it regularly. It would appear that it's on. Bill says, do you really think it was orchestrated? He was surprised to see Tom Brown, their Triple M stablemates. I'm certain, Bill, that he was surprised to see. I don't think he's going to do Tom Brown any favours there. And it was a great get by Tommy, and he was there at his Channel 7 guys, and his number 21 ranking is going to go up.
Made me feel guilty. Great picture of you in the Herald Sun today, Gaz, as well, just online. I want the long hair back.
I have not seen that.
I tried to show before, but
yes, I beg your pardon.
With Hutto and Nicky Dow, you got the long hair and the big beard. I like it.
When I had a year in the wilderness. He might come back. Tommy and Turin before we take a break. Hey, Tom.
Morning, Gaz and Kane. How we going, boys?
We're going well. Thanks, Tommy.
That's the way. I'm a Saints supporter. Don't like Ross the way he left and everything like that, but you can't deny his credentials as a coach. And a mate of mine and I, we've been talking 2 or 3 times a day since this has all been happening, and he's an Essendon supporter, and he makes a really good point. He said to me yesterday, he said, if you and I go to the game next year, St Kilda versus Essendon, he said, I'm more worried about St Kilda being coached by Ross Lyon than what I am being coached by Brett Ratton.
As an opposition player, supporter rather.
As an opposition supporter, yeah.
Yeah, I think I think there will be that sentiment around for sure, Tommy. Thanks for that. And there's lots of considerations that need to be taken into this, and I'm sure they're doing them all right now. And in the end, as we say, if they hook their wagon up, they hook their wagon up, and they're going to go full bottle. And I reckon Andrew Bassett, who's a wildly successful businessman who's got a hard edge as well, I'm told, will support it, and then we'll sit back and enjoy the ride. AFL Star Police Probe is the front page of Melbourne's Herald Sun. North Melbourne young gun Taron Thomas is caught up in a police investigation amid allegations of malicious behaviour against a former partner. Kano.
Well, I firstly want to have a listen to, all the talk's been about Jason Horne-Francis and his attitude and the reasons why they were happy to trade him with 1 year to go on his contract. And Brady Rawlings, their list manager, spoke about that during the trade period.
The thing that probably people don't realise, we've got all the information as a club. We know everything that has occurred this year, so we've got all the information at hand, and a lot of people don't.
So I was surprised at the lack of accountability of the club for the situation that they put a young player in, prospect of having 4 coaches in 11 months in the environment that he was in and how unsettled it was. So they're really strong on him. Now, this largely involves allegations, but in a separate issue, it emerged that Thomas's car was impounded in July when he was checked at a booze bus. And now police confirm that the 22-year-old man had no driver's licence at the time. And it's not the only issue he'd been caught up with. His body language had been questioned this year. He'd gone on social media and had a crack at a fan asking how much they earn and telling them how much he earns. There's other issues at North Melbourne than just Jason Horne-Francis. So I hope the club is actually looking internally going, hang on, yep, Horne-Francis had his issues, but what could we have done better to support our young players? And is there a cultural issue and an issue with the behaviour of some of our players and their attitude, their competitiveness on the field that we need to address as a footy club and stop blaming other young players, particularly, Taron Thomas is 22, Horn Francis is 19. The environment that they've provided for their young players is not up to scratch, and they need to be honest with that.
Yeah, I would hope they are. The fundamental difference in these two situations is one bloke's walked out on the club and the other bloke is still within the club. So the guy that's still within the club is going to get their arms wrapped around them and giving them the sort of support that you're asking for that perhaps should have been afforded to both players last year. And Alistair Clarkson-led regime, or whoever it is that takes over, Todd Viney, I know, obviously, as well as anyone, and that's the sort of environment that he'll be working very hard to establish. They could come out and say, we've got all the information on Taron Thomas as well, but it won't serve the purpose whilst he's a North Melbourne supporter. Did it serve a purpose when they've seen...
Well, that's the point. I mean, it's hypocritical of them to do that. Now, he was contracted and he was a North Melbourne player, and their most exciting prospect since Wayne Carey, Horn Francis, wasn't there? You can't deny that. Go and watch 3 minutes of Horn Francis's highlights and think they've let him go. He was contracted. They could have held him to that. Did they support him enough? I was frustrated by the blame game in the end and the lack of accountability from North.
And then your mate, and mine, but your mate on a Friday would tell you we're scratching the surface on the back of it. I heard you two going at it and was having a good old laugh about the ice bath, but there's a bit more to it. He would suggest.
Well, and I was trying to say, well, there's issues with other players at the footy club as well, which you're going to defend. I mean, what's the smoking gun with Horn Francis that he had a bad attitude towards Boomer Harvey? I mean, if that's the biggest offence ever, that's what I was trying to say.
There would have been more than that, though.
Well, what? Because there's a different side of the story from the Horn Francis camp as well, and those at South Adelaide that were with him when he was playing with men as a 17-year-old. We had no issues with his attitude. He kicked 3 in a prelim final and won us the game. He was great to deal with.
Yeah, so he might be one of those young players who's still working out how to handle himself and react when things aren't going well and you're kicking 3 goals and winning a game. And maybe that's when you see your behavioural traits come out, and that's when you're seeing things that South Adelaide go, hey, well, I've seen this kid play with adults. He's great, because he dominated and was ripping at the shreds, and it was great, and hadn't probably been challenged by the game in the manner that North Melbourne's lack of setup and the demands of AFL senior footy are going to challenge it.
And imagine if we'd kicked other players to the curb for that. Gary Ablett Jr. was sat down in front of his teammates and said, "You got to train out. You got to do this. You don't push through injury. All of that, and that's well documented." Bailey Smith is on camera doing drugs, and the Bulldogs support him. I mean, in terms of Horn Francis's crimes, they seem to be pretty minor for me, particularly when I pick up the front page of the Herald Sun and there's a North Melbourne player on it again after the year that they've had. And there's excuses for letting Horn Francis go. That would be my view, that he's a young man.
Okay, so would it have been different? Yep, I appreciate it. It would have been different if Jason said, listen, I'm staying, right? Now, help me through this. I understand that I've been not at the mark. I understand this. You need to also understand that the environment hasn't been quite where it's needed to be. But I'm staying. I'm going to commit. I'm going to stay committed to the 2 year, and let's work our way through it. Then we wouldn't have heard any of that stuff.
No, I don't think we would have. So that's the blame. Once again, I'm repeating myself, but that's where I was a little bit critical of the whole situation.
Right, it's an interesting time down there too. With Alistair Clarkson, I see Alistair Clarkson and Brendan Bolton have left and headed over to Celtic to do
overseas,
some work.
And Mitch Cleary got that. Have you got a read on how this is?
No.
It's almost moves.
Yeah, I have no read
day
on
to
it.
me. Do you think he just starts on November 1 if it's not finalised?
At some
He's
stage,
going to have to.
He'll have to, yeah. And it's not an AFL sanctioned penalty. They've deemed, both both coaches have said, well, we'll just remove ourselves here while the committee or the investigation, if that's what it is going to be formed. And if that's going to continue to draw out and they can't quite, settle on the right set up and structure that's going to be satisfactory to both parties, then you can't indefinitely stay away. I wouldn't have thought. So it'll be interesting.
And I wonder whether they pick up the phone to Brett Ratton. I mean, it's very, very difficult for Brett to find a job at this situation. There appears to be North Melbourne as the club with an opportunity, and if anything
History
did
with
go,
Alistair Clarkson and Todd Viney.
and know that he's capable if Alistair Clarkson was to miss time, that Brett Radden could step in and be the man. So I'd be surprised if he probably doesn't end up there, Brett, which would be good for him.